Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's great to have so many of you here to listen to Weiwei talk about his new film on the very early stages of the coronavirus pandemic in China, Coronation. I'm Tania Branigan. I write foreign editorials for The Guardian, and before that, I was China correspondent for many years. And really, from the moment I sort of turned up in 2008, Ai Weiwei was never out of the headlines. Now, there are many terrific reasons why, of course. Many of you in the UK alone will have seen his sunflower seeds installation at Tate Modern, or his hugely powerful show at the Royal Academy. And if you want to see his work now, you can do so at a safe social distance from everybody, because it's on the giant display screens in Piccadilly Circus every night at 8:20 p.m. That's your chance to catch it. But of course, he's also made waves because of his willingness to speak out as China has moved in an increasingly authoritarian direction, and because of the costs that he's faced as a result, from the 81 days he spent in detention through to the fact he now lives in exile. In 2017, while living in Germany, he made a widely acclaimed documentary, Human Flow, on the refugee crisis. And he's now made his home here in England, but he's turned his eye back to China with this latest film. Just a few really housekeeping notes on the question and answer session. We're going to be live online for an hour. I'll be asking the questions in the first half hour, but I know that many of you have questions too, so we will get to those in the next 30 minutes. And thank you to all of you who've sent questions in already. If you haven't, it's not too late to do so. There should be a question and answer button on the right-hand side of your screens, and you can use that to send questions in either by name or anonymously, as you prefer. Please do keep them short, because we've had quite a lot already and we'd like to get to as many as we can. Now, some of you will have already had a chance to see this documentary, Coronation. If you haven't, you can find the streaming details at iweiwei.com/coronation. But for now, here's just a taste of this striking film. Ai Weiwei, thank you very much for joining us tonight. This must have been a very tough film to make. I mean, China's always been a difficult place to work and to film, much more so now. And obviously you're in exile. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to make this film?
Yes, I have made a film during the 2003 SARS in Beijing. So that's 17 years ago. So when this corona started, I has been very conscious. And when it's locked down, we have experienced how China have always controls the information and never transparent about what really happening. So we start to ask our friend, people used to work with me, to take the opportunity to, in the lockdown situation, because they're in the Wuhan city, many of them, some are artists, some are colleagues working together, just to honestly record their daily life. Of course, to make a film, it takes more than that. So we still, every day we're working at, every day I would call them to give them directions, to find the new people join the effort. And it's always difficult because China is forbidden to shoot, and to of course, if they know you're making a film, that's even it's impossible. So we tried many ways. So come out as this film. The film is not just about this pandemic, it's about the COVID-19, but at the same time it's about China. And fortunately, get our footage, and we edited it in Cambridge, UK, and it comes out very fast, surprised everybody.
I mean, as you say, it's extraordinarily sort of intimate footage in a place that really doesn't welcome that. We see inside hospitals, we see inside quarantine centres, we see these very sort of intimate scenes. I wondered, how concerned were you about the repercussions for the subjects and for the people who were doing the filming, and how worried were they when they started talking to you about working on this film?
Well, it's very different conditions there. There's ICU unit, there's a surveillance room, there's a control room, the city control room, and there's the place they can get the ashes, look at the different locations. It's all difficult. Rarely we use the hidden cameras, but mostly we managed to take the image in the sense to just document it. And of course, nobody knows who is behind this, and my name is never being mentioned. And many people who worked on the film, they also work for the state medias, so they get this kind of pass to do some recordings. And of course, we want honest recording, so you can see they clearly reflects on how China, the medical teams, and how the professionals worked and dealing with those patients.
I wonder if we could sort of rewind a little bit to the start of the crisis. You said you were sort of keeping a very close eye on it from its beginnings, particularly sort of having worked on a film about SARS. When it first sort of emerged, how big an impact did you think it was going to have? Did you foresee that this would be something that really stretched beyond China in the end and would affect so many people?
No, I once the first alarm I have is when they tells they will lock down the city. That never happened, even in China. So then on the internet, you see the fashion, how they lock down the city is quite brutal. They would even welding the door, so you're not just locked, you're really sealed into your room. And they made a lot of arrests. It's big disaster. And then every time when something happened like this, they need a new vocabulary. Then I think to record it is most important than to give any kind of criticism or analyzing. So by then I already started the filming.
And what were your sort of feelings watching as the pandemic spread?
Then I was in Italy, in Rome, doing this opera Turandot. So daytime I'm directing the opera, the nighttime I'm downloading the pandemic from Wuhan, all those footages. And that time Italy already started to have quite strong infections. The disease first spread in Italy. So we have to shut down our or Torandat. And, this has come to the final stage before the show started. So I can strongly feel the hit, and immediately, Spain and France and gradually England. But I think it hits US a little bit later, because I don't know, because they never test or whatever, but it's getting stronger and stronger.
Were you surprised that it took parts of Europe, I mean, certainly the UK, really a while to sort of wake up to how much of a threat this was? Because it was very striking to me, as somebody who'd been watching events unfold in China, that this was something that sort of had potentially repercussions elsewhere. And yet it seemed, even when the first cases emerged in Europe, that people weren't really prepared for how fast it would spread.
Yeah. When you see China announced they controlled the disease, which basically I think they controlled it pretty well in the way, and then you see how the disease has been so uncontrollable in the United States and Europe, and now we see the second wave comes. And it has to always put me in thinking and argument, about these two different type of society, and so these arguments will go on and on.
You said this film was really as much about China as it is about the coronavirus. Can you sort of unpack for me a little bit about what you think we've sort of learned from this? I mean, I don't want to spoil the film for those who haven't seen it, obviously, but there are some very striking scenes, for example, where you have the man who is struggling over what happens to his father's ashes and whether he's allowed to collect his father's ashes in person, and what seems this almost sort of absurd process that goes on and on, where he simply isn't allowed to come and claim the ashes. And he sort of talks about the sort of the strength of power of the government machinery, but also one of the things that isn't ever very clear is whether there's a reason for that refusal, or whether this is something that's simply being decided, and therefore they're refusing to change it, and so you get this very sort of close-up picture of this struggle between the individual and the state. Is that one of the things you were sort of thinking about?
Yeah, this is really clearly to reflect not just the medical issue, but rather a political issue. And the character in between two different societies or more different societies. You see the disease not only happens in the Europe and China, but almost everywhere. So it's clearly I think in the future study, people will study really how the human acts or political decisions being made in dealing with the disease. China, China basically is a society has the unpaid, now later they said they have a communist, but now they have capitalism. But that I think China have the combination of three. You're really a feudalist society, which is the king or the real old people like father or grandfather will make all the decisions. The other people will never judge it right or wrong, but just listen to it, or if you not listening to it, you'll be punished. And there's no question about it. So with that kind of characteristic, they call it Chinese socialist characteristic, basically is authoritarian capitalism, which everything owned by the state, but the state owned by a party, and the party owned by one person. So with that kind of character, China would act very like one person. That every decision made just like one person, from top of the society to the bottom, to the village, to the lowest, smallest working unit. They have a party's nerve, which is a unit of a communist unit, which can directly reflects on any decisions. No human society ever created like this, and not mafia, not Nazis, not any society has been created like China, and it has a great advantage. It shows a great advantage in past 30 years, and they made a great development in almost every aspect. But only one thing they never changed is this authoritarian how do you say, dictatorship. You can never question the authority, and you don't have freedom of speech. You don't have an independent judicial system, and you cannot vote, and you cannot give out any political opinions. And in the public or even in the private, now if you chat with people online, like WeChat, the doctor Even Liang was just talk to other doctors on WeChat, but by the highest television stations, CCTV, and other stations, all talk about it as a rumor. It's no such thing as this transmittable disease. So by using by manipulate the information and stop the information, and they take advantage. They prepare them in the better condition in dealing with domestic and international issues. They will always do it. They cannot change. It's not a possibility. There's no possibility they would learn a lesson, because without doing that, they're not an authoritarian society. They're simply just will have no power at all. So that's why after communists already exists in 99 years, this policy never been changed. So they have their internal secret, and that's maybe the most dangerous weapon, is by they know more than you, and they're very strategic. They have a very strong planning, and they know what they get. And through the pandemic, you can see how it worked. But in the West, you with this capitalism, you established the democracy and freedom, or press, independent press. It's not absolute, but still you have some space there, and that of course you have to pay price for that, because everything have to come to the individual's will. You have individual's freedom. So the state is not powerful. It just give you some suggestions and give you some policies, but still individuals have to learn themselves. They have to first to be conscious, and then they have to really learn this gradually. So that's why we see how difficult in the West to really to deal with disease like that.
You mentioned Li Wenliang, the whistleblower doctor who was sort of punished by the authorities. And obviously, at the start of the crisis, we saw this huge outpouring of anger and frustration and suspicion in China about the way that the authorities had covered things up, about the way they'd silenced whistleblowers. And obviously, sort of some of this is reflected in the film. And there was a point at which some people were wondering whether this could, in the long term, be a kind of turning point for China itself. At the same time, we've obviously seen a big expansion in what was already a sort of massive surveillance apparatus, with sort of the tracking for the virus and so forth. And I just wonder, in the sort of the longer term, do you think China is more likely to change, to reform, because of this, or has it just really entrenched Communist Party control in the end?
I don't think China would willingly or even to be consciously to realize they have to change. And every time when they had this little bit of temptation of being proved with even bigger prices they have to pay. So China, we used to say, if you have, because China basically is a ground, if you compare to environment, it has no, the earth cannot hold any water. When there's a few drops of water, it starts to flood because the ecosystem has to be completely destroyed. When there's no drop of water, they become dry. There's almost no perfect condition. So they always have to balance in between these two. So when they are loose, it will be completely chaotic situation, very messy. But when they are tight, everybody pretend they're just like that. It's not going to make any move. So this is it's extremely difficult for them to make any change, and they somehow they enjoy it to benefit by this control, and they become very arrogant. They become laughing at the problems with the democratic society, and so I don't think there's a chance Chinese authoritarian would make some change itself.
There's a fascinating moment in your documentary where one of your subjects just looks at the sort of the footage of people in the US and so forth and says, well, this is a lesson for those always itching to go abroad. Do you feel it's sort of fueled nationalism in China in a sense, looking at the response from other countries and the way that other countries have really failed to get on top of this virus?
I think 99% or even bigger percentage of Chinese believe communists are really efficient and helping the society, and they believe the West is just being ignorant and incapable in control, and they're laughing about what happens in United States and Europe, and of course the patriotic this kind of condition is higher than any other time. It's just come to like how do you say, the Cultural Revolution time at the Mao's era.
I mean, at the same time, we've seen this a real shift in sort of international attitudes towards China over the course of the pandemic, that they've become much, much more negative towards China. And I wonder how you sort of feel those tensions will play out in the long run. Are we going to sort of see increasingly two sort of separate realms in the world, a sort of a return to the sort of the Maoist instincts of a country almost cut off from large parts of the West, certainly?
I think the West really come to a moment to rethinking and examine its values and their own structure. And I think this is probably a good thing come with this pandemic, because make West at least to realize the partner they have in their mind for business for past decades are not reliable and are not trustable. And that is a pretty bad signal because the West and China has been deeply bonded together, in almost every aspect, in political level, in economic level, and the scientific level. And so it's very hard and a very deep price the West will pay even to realize this condition. And simply they have to understand that this system China is building strong, which will subverts the West establishment from the very essential values like human rights, human dignity, understanding of human conditions, and for the future development. So this will be a hard lesson, and of course, I think many nations from this already thinking how to not just do it superficially, but really do a more profound, more philosophical discussions about how this very confrontational crisis would have a long run or lasting in the future struggle.
I wonder if I just ask you something slightly more personal, which is what this year, this pandemic, this lockdown has sort of meant to you. You did an interview with The Guardian with Simon Hattenston at the start of the year, and you actually said you weren't sure how long you wanted to be an artist. What's your thinking now? Has that shifted at all?
Yes, I always questioning my own positions, always questioning, my relations to my profession or how people look at me, and I think there's always lessons to be learned. And I always questioning how much art would, in dealing with political problems, and because we are very deeply into this condition, and if we are not be conscious, that only means we're not prepared, and that ignorance will pay a higher price for human society. So yes, I always was thinking, the normal practice of as an artist, a same doctrine does not function well. Even you make a film like which is quite dealing with the current issues, but still very few people would pay attention, and we watch, or people refuse to really getting deeper discussions or to understand the situation, because we are so used to easy life, comfort, and happiness, and the so-called liberal, but which are really I don't understand if there's a liberal avoid the confrontation and the struggle. So a lot of issues need to be really discussed.
I have so much more I'd love to ask you, but I know our audience does too, so I'm going to move on to their questions, if I may. Remember, if you haven't sent in a question already, you can still do so. There should be a question and answer button to the right of your screen, and if you click on that, you should be able to type it in, either anonymously or with your name as you prefer. We've been sent a few questions already. I'm actually going to give you 3 in 1, if I may, because I think they're sort of related. So Mukesh Kapila asks, are authoritarian states better at managing public health crises than democratic ones? Becky Selick asks, as the UK approaches our second wave with 9 times more COVID deaths than China, what lockdown measures should we have, and where would you set the boundary between civil liberties and human survival? And then Debbie Turner asks, how much control should a state have over its people in a pandemic?
Well, this reaches a lot of issues here, but the simple answer is authoritarian society puts the cost maybe not on the number of deaths, but on the every individual's mind and on the human condition. So everyone in this 1.4 billion people, they have more fear and very uncertain about what really happened. They will never really know what really happened. And they have not a right picture about the West. You know, the image about the West has been distorted. And so with that kind of belief, to let people know less is better for them. And that is, that's why that society is inhuman. Because it doesn't encourage individual freedom, and it does not without individual freedom, there's no creativity and no imagination, and of course there's a lot of fear. You know, if you talk wrong sentence on even WeChat, the police can knock on your door. But otherwise, they're pretty happy. They make small money, and they're much more have a better life there. But I still think that it has no future at all. And talk about the West, as we mentioned, we are learning from every disaster, and there's a political, there's a scientific, and research. There's public opinions with the argument, and the different parties or different left or right, a lot of argument. But we believe a society like this is healthier. But to fight for this kind of society, there's a cost, there's a struggle, and there's a lot of life has been sacrificed. And hopefully we can learn, have some good lessons to come out.
Now, Kareem Tabrizi asks perhaps a related question, which is, do you feel the virus has further eroded faith in government, but also democratic political processes? So I think this is perhaps a question addressed more to sort of views of the West than of China itself.
I think we are dealing with real crisis, and it's a time to examine how the political system is working or not, and also our health system or our price examination, or all those are working or not. And that's why I said that there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
Anonymous has just posted to ask, how do you feel when coronavirus is referred to as the China virus, which is obviously something we've seen Trump and the Republicans in particular do a lot, but we've heard it here as well?
It doesn't bother me when it's just started, because it's factual, and also because China is trying to cover up the virus and give the virus a chance to spread out to all over, But once it's developed, when West is always already been conscious to see the lockdown of Wuhan and the extreme difficult situation in control, and then many of them are not responding very well. So by then to call it a China virus is unfair. It's not a virus, it's a virus. And it happened, originalized in Wuhan doesn't mean, it should not have this kind of discrimination type of color in it. It has to be factual and has to be scientific. And only by doing that, It tells how intelligent we are in look at a situation like this.
Sarah Tooze was wanting to know what you think of the handling of the coronavirus crisis in the UK in particular.
I basically, at the beginning, I think um, since not only UK but the US is more clear, and the UK followed basically that path, to think that is not a big deal, to I think the purpose of saying that I think is basically is some kind of financial worries or economic worries. But of course, they paid a much higher price on that because this is a very critical situation, and it's beyond their imagine. You get Boris get into hospital now. You get Trump get into hospital. You can see they really paid heavy price for their mishandling at the beginning, But of course, many people lost their life. Yeah, that's all I can think about.
Now, some other people had some slightly broader questions, perhaps, about China. Lynette Richards asked, how do people in China respond to your activism?
Basically, there's no, it's a sealed box. My voice can never reach China. Nobody can repeat what I have said on internet in China, and will be immediately deleted. So China basically conceptually see itself as a world, and Chinese people always call anybody else as a foreigner. Even when they're in the foreign nation, they still call other people as a foreigner. That's very, very interesting. Conceptually, China believes China is the world. And of course, I'm not a welcome person, and there's almost no single figure like me in China. There's a few, but they've been put away. They put in jail or they disappeared. They're not even openly discuss matters like me. They may touches one issue, about pollution, or they may touches one issue about one undemocratic process, and then they will be put away. Recently they sentenced one entrepreneur, a very famous person, Mr. Ren, and they sentenced him for 18 years. Basically, he has no crime at all. He belonged to the revolutionary family, and he's in very high position, but they just want to show everybody how tough they can be, and that works. Nobody want to question them.
There was a point before that sort of shift we saw around 2010 or 2011, when there was a little bit more of a space where you were able to sort of speak more publicly within China, and you obviously had a huge social media following within China. I wonder, do you think the people who were following you then remember that? Do that you think they are still sympathetic to the viewpoints they were sympathetic to, that they're still sort of with you in spirit, even if they can't follow what you're actually saying now? Or do you think maybe the state's been successful in just sort of wiping that phase from most people's minds?
Yes, there was a moment, when I was make a big splash on internet. I thought that was difficult, but compared to now, that was really loose and a lot of space. And today is not possible. But the state maybe learned from what I'm doing. They realize the danger of the open up or freedom of speech, and they much tight the internet control and so-called maintain the stability control, and very successful. And today after the pandemics, and they even learned more. I think the China benefits the most is first successfully controlled the disease, so they still go back to be very productive. And second, their state civilians uh, culture or civilians, yeah, you can call it culture now, because it really deeply integrated with every individual of that 1.4 billion people, not only in China, but also the students outside of China, because everybody using this WeChat or TikTok, and they can easily control all the information, and that's how they are so successful.
Do you think other countries should be controlling those Chinese apps, or in fact, do you think that they should um, let those run?
First, I think in this free society, you encourages any kind of competition, as long as with fair competition or is the it's lawful. And but China, we often forget this is not a fair competition. China, every company are owned by state. Even they pretend it's private, now there's no such thing as private in China. The communists are really deeply into every shells of Chinese society. If they want something, they get it. Otherwise you cannot exist. So big companies like Huawei is very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous because it's a military type of a company. They got all the money to develop with high strategy to beat all the competitors in the West. Of course, they got a lot of representative in the West political sector, or lobbyists, and they almost can manage to get into anywhere. That's why China becomes so arrogant. This that is it's impossible to stop them now. But I still think the West has to be clear to really examine what is a society like China, and if they really can cope with the situation. It's not really about China. China is going to grow very strong if there internally nothing stops it. The West cannot stop China. It's not possible. Even by sanction, you cannot stop it. But it's a very complicated situation now. But if the West are not very clear, then of course, with a classic capitalism, when there's opportunity, and you just rush into it. You see that's why even politically you try to make some decision, but in the reality, there's always companies want to take the volume. They will make the profit, definitely. So it really need to have a clear policy. Otherwise, it's not possible.
You may have partially, I think, answered the next question, which is from Anna Berrier. She says, I don't think any of us is under any illusion about the authoritarian nature of the Chinese regime. But the question is, what can we in the West do to push China to change?
I think these different levels. Yes, it's easy to understand. It takes 5 minutes to understand what's the difference between China and the West. But since you're capitalism, the weakness of the other side is always advantage. So those big corporations and the big economic developments will not stop because the benefits under that's how they make a profit. The profit is so big, and so there's a policy level and there's a practical level. And I think China plays this very well with this authoritarian capitalism. I still don't know, without a clear policy, how can you stop Western companies or big financial giants and to practice in China.
I wonder if you think that bottom line is shifting at all for some of the big corporations, whether that be in terms of the sort of the practical effects we've seen with the pandemic, people starting to think about the dangers of being reliant on a single country to supply anything. So thinking about supply chains and the resilience of those, or whether it be about the sort of the cover up over coronavirus, how much they can trust their partners in China, or whether it simply be sort of reputational issues, such as some of the chains which have obviously got factories in Xinjiang starting to get sort of bad publicity over conditions there.
Well, when people consuming, they look at the price tag. They will not questioning where this come from, what kind of ideology it reflects, and this is our today's world. I don't think by just to questioning right or wrong would change the basic condition of capitalism, or free society. So I think this is or much complicated than that.
Fiona Hawthorne has written in, and she says she'd love to hear your view on the future of Hong Kong.
There's no future for Hong Kong. Hong Kong already become a Shanghai or Shenzhen, another province of China. This West or UK or US cry or support, it will not change the Hong Kong's condition, because this simply one never take a position of to understand the issue or to discuss the issue, and also what really would help Hong Kong is the West to understand Hong Kong is part of their system, their value system, and by protecting Hong Kong, the West would have a real challenge with China. But that if it's not happening in Hong Kong, it will happen in somewhere else, and it will be much painful for the West. So I really think the West should be clearly aware why they have to protect Hong Kong.
We do have time still for one or two more questions if anybody wants to write in. I've still got some more here that people have sent in earlier. Jill Hart asks, what do you believe is the role of art and of being an artist in a world that's navigating a pandemic like COVID-19?
I think still art would probably offer some alternative way of a look at the politics and the value system, and would affect our judgment about our daily behaving. And it's a time we really have to be very conscious about and rejudge or common conditions. So I think art still functions very well.
You've always obviously been much more overt about your political activism than many artists are. Do you feel that some of them are perhaps dodging the issues?
I just trying to be nice to the art world. I honestly, I think they did very little, and it's not even relevant. But still, I trying to still think art is important of a human, as human character or quality, and it just not developed so well, I should say.
Karen Howe, or Huff, apologies if I've got your name wrong, had a question, which is, what have you learned during lockdown? Now, this is one that interests me because obviously you've been through a lot of very extreme experiences in your life and had to demonstrate a sort of resilience that most of us can't imagine. Going right back to your childhood, that experience of sort of growing up in internal exile when your father was sort of being punished in the Maoist era, and then of course your 81 days in detention. So, how have you got through lockdown? How have you found it? What have you learned?
Honestly, I feel the lockdown is beautiful to me, and I'm not talking about the other people's the lost. For me personally, I spend more time with my son and with my girlfriend. We walk in the empty street or in the fields to look at the flowers and the grass. I never paid that much attention to nature. And I'm very grateful. I have a period of time, really peaceful. But same time, we did many things. We did the 3 films. Coronation is one, and we did a Hong Kong film. It will come out very soon. And then we did another film about Rohingya refugees, which is the biggest refugee camp in the world, and almost being forgotten. And we still have a lot of discussions and to cope and to dealing with the struggle in understanding the world and the world politics, China and the West. And also we made a success for like auction for not auction but on eBay we're selling masks and generated 1.4 million and dollars donate to Human Rights Watch and Doctor Without Borders and Refugee International. So give those people on the front line some energy to really to help those people in need. So there's so much you can do, and people should not just waiting. So I also do my writing. So I have been quite busy, but very quite peacefully, I would say. And as you said, the condition is not new to me. I was born into lockdown. My father was exiled to Xinjiang, the place now they talk about the re-education camps. But I spent 16 years there, and we lived 5 years underground. Basically it's just a whole underground. So it's nothing new to me.
I wonder, I mean, it's such a sort of, it's been obviously a very difficult time for many people, but also looking around the world, I mean, some of the very themes you've touched upon, the treatment of refugees internationally, the shift that we've seen in China towards increasing authoritarianism, but also when we look at the US and what's happening there, again, a place you've lived and know so much about. How do you stay hopeful? How do people find hope in this very difficult time?
I think we should not have too much illusion. The situation can getting better, but most likely or getting worse. And I think that our as a human being, individual or society, we have to really examine our behaving on this planet. Life is a miracle. It given to us, to everyone of us. It's priceless, and also we are going to pass away. We'll leave something for the future generation. So those are very simple fact and very easy to understand. And those values are beyond any political argument. So if we stick with those very, humanity, human dignity, and very essential values because by daily political slogans, then the life can be beautiful and can be positive. And even we suffer still can be positive because we suffer for meaning.
In 2020, it's very nice to hear a rare note of hope there and hope for the future. We've got one last question which has sort of popped up. What in this film, Coronation, are you most proud of as a moment in the film? And what in your recent work, more generally, are you most proud of, do you feel?
I think that for the film, I trying to offer an individual's view. Artist has been China deeply involved with all aspect. My father is writer. I'm born with exile, and myself have become a political dissident. Then I spent the years, like 12 years in the United States. Now I've spent time in Germany and UK. So it offers one individual view about the China, the political system could be a mirror to us to look at, to rethink about our society. So that's all I want to do. But of course, uh, maybe people doesn't care about that. Too complicated, maybe. And for others, I'm also very happy we worked on the Piccadilly 2020, which is in the metropolitan area, is a public how do you say, the public installation. And each day I can have 2 minutes to really wrap up many thinking, to add some color to London's, for the civil society, for the citizens who lives the city, to use the city as a community, and to be together.
Well, Ai Weiwei, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a fascinating session. Thank you to all of those watching, especially all of you who sent in questions. I know you've got a huge amount lined up ahead for this year. As you've sort of suggested in your conversation tonight, you never really stop. So we look forward to seeing what you're doing next and hope that perhaps you can come back and join us to talk about it again. For those of you, thank you very much. For those of you who haven't watched Coronation already, you can rent it digitally. So remember, if you go to the website iweiwei.com/coronation, you can get the details there. Guardian Live Online will also be having more events coming up. So there is an upside to lockdown, which is you can sit at home and watch some of these. That will include newsrooms on the US election and on the COVID pandemic itself, and also a conversation with Noam Chomsky. You can find out more about those at theguardian.com/Guardian Live. Ai Weiwei, thank you very much. To all of you at home, have a great evening. Wear a mask, stay safe. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.